Thank you, Jason. The Mid-Ohio Valley Regional Airport is raising concerns about an airline chosen to serve the MOV community. Our Megan Marshall has more information on the story from the Regional Airport's manager.
Air Wisconsin was selected by the U.S. Department of Transportation under the Essential Air Service. This is a decision that the MOV Regional Airport does not agree meets the unique needs and preferences of its community, according to manager Benjamin Avil. On Monday morning at the Wood County Commission meeting, Avil shared his concerns and the official complaint the airport made to the U.S. DOT.
We've asked for the Department of Transportation as to, hey, look at this, and just disqualify the bid because the service that's advertised isn't there. We didn't even think it was a viable bid up front.
Avil says they have concerns about Air Wisconsin's ability to deliver the services it proposed in its bid.
When we talked to Waterloo, Iowa, they were the last airport to have them as an essential air service, and their contract utterly failed. So we're looking at past performance. So hey, where's the last time they were at? It's like, well, they failed, and looking at what they're doing now, I'm like, they're making claims that are beyond what their performance is. So, and our concern ultimately is that we don't want to go down a road and have them fail here.
Avil also says there are concerns about Air Wisconsin's relationship with the major carrier they operate under.
In January of this year, they announced a separation between them and American Airlines. They would start out and then end here within a year, and we'd have 2 years then, or the majority of the 2 years, not having that same service level. So that's the issue we have there.
If the airline were to fail a couple of months in, Avil says there is no guarantee they would get a replacement. The MOV Regional Airport is asking the community to speak up and share their concerns about this decision before it is finalized.
We are up against a deadline. Contour, their period of performance ends at the end of September, so we have a little less than 2 months. So we're trying to get things done as soon as we can.
He says the official complaint is not to force the U.S. DOT to do anything, but to let them know there is a legitimate issue they have that needs attention. You can read more about this story and who to share your concerns with at WTAP.com. Reporting from Parkersburg, I'm Megan Marshall, WTAP News.